The hallway seemed endless. Daniel's flashlight flickered, casting long shadows that twisted across the peeling wallpaper. The air was thick with the scent of mold and decay, each breath tasting of something ancient and forgotten. He could hear the faint drip of water somewhere deep within the asylum, echoing like a heartbeat through the building. He stepped cautiously, each footfall echoing in the emptiness. His camera clicked occasionally, capturing warped images of broken doors, rusted railings, and the remnants of what had once been a bustling psychiatric institution. Faded labels still clung to some of the doors: Ward 3, Severe Cases, Isolation Room 2, Observation Lab. A sudden gust of cold air swept through the hallway, slamming a door shut with a deafening bang. Daniel jumped, his flashlight swinging wildly, illuminating the door just long enough to see that it had been marked with red paint, "Leave or Remain." He swallowed hard. His journalistic instinct screamed at him to retreat, but curiosity had its claws deep. There was something in this place that demanded to be documented, to be witnessed. Something alive, maybe, or perhaps the memory of life long gone. Daniel moved forward, his shoes scuffing across the dust-covered floor. The further he went, the heavier the silence became, pressing against his ears until he could almost hear his own heartbeat above it. And then came the whisper, soft and barely audible, yet unmistakable, "Daniel." He froze. The sound seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. Rational thought tried to calm him. It must be the wind. Or a trick of the acoustics. But even as he reasoned it away, a part of him shivered. Something was watching, patient and waiting. At the end of the corridor, a faint light flickered. Daniel's flashlight caught a glint of something metallic, a rusted wheelchair tipped onto its side. Beside it lay a torn piece of paper, yellowed with age. On it was scrawled a single word: "Follow." He debated for a moment, but the thrill of discovery overcame fear. Slowly, deliberately, Daniel stepped toward the paper, each movement measured. He felt as if the asylum itself were holding its breath, watching his every move, anticipating his next step. And then the floorboards creaked behind him. Not in rhythm with his steps, but apart, somewhere closer than he thought. Something, or someone, was moving. Daniel spun around, his flashlight slicing through the darkness. Nothing. Just the same hallway, lined with peeling paint and broken tiles. He forced himself to breathe evenly, telling himself it was only the wind. Yet, the echo of footsteps lingered, uneven and deliberate, fading only when he focused on the floorboards in front of him. He picked up the torn paper, its edges crumbling at his touch. "Follow," it said, but Daniel didn't know what it meant. Follow to what? To danger? To discovery? Or to something far worse? His hands shook slightly, and he shoved the paper into his notebook, camera ready. Pushing onward, the hallway narrowed, the ceiling sagging lower as if the building itself were trying to crush him. He passed a series of doors, each one labeled with warnings he could barely make out: "Do not enter," "Observation in progress," "Patients under sedation," "Restricted access," "Staff only." The irony was not lost on him: the asylum had been abandoned for decades. Lightning struck outside, illuminating the corridor in stark white light for a split second. Daniel froze as he saw movement at the far end, a shadow that flickered just beyond the reach of his flashlight. His heart pounded as he raised the camera, snapping a photo. The shutter clicked, and the flash illuminated a figure, a gaunt man in tattered clothing, standing perfectly still. When the light faded, the figure was gone. A chill ran down his spine. He whispered to himself, "It's okay. It's nothing. Just your imagination." But he knew it wasn't imagination. Something in the air had changed. The building seemed to pulse, a living entity aware of his presence. He continued, carefully stepping over debris. The walls now bore scratches, jagged lines that seemed too deliberate to be random. Some resembled symbols, others looked like faces twisted in silent screams. Daniel knelt, examining them closer. Faintly, he heard a scratching sound from above, like fingernails on wood. "Hello?" he called, his voice wavering. Silence answered. Then came a whisper, low and guttural, almost drowned by the wind outside, "Turn back." Daniel shook his head, gripping his flashlight tighter. "I can't," he muttered. "I have to see this." He reached a door at the end of the corridor, marked only by a rusted number, 13. The hinges groaned as he pushed it open, revealing a spiral staircase descending into darkness. Cold air wafted up from below, carrying the smell of damp earth and decay. The shadows in the stairwell seemed to breathe, stretching and contracting as if alive. Taking a deep breath, Daniel stepped down. Each creaking step echoed like a scream, every inch deeper pulling him further into the unknown. Halfway down, he paused. In the faint glow of his flashlight, he noticed writing on the wall, etched deep into the plaster. "Those who enter never leave. Watch the shadows, or they will watch you." A shiver ran through him. The camera in his hands felt heavier, almost as if resisting. Daniel swallowed and continued, descending further into the darkness where the air grew colder and the silence thicker. At the bottom of the stairs, he reached a long corridor lined with doors, each one ajar. Faint sounds echoed from within, whispers, sobbing, sometimes laughter, but nothing he could identify. The building was no longer empty, it was inhabited by memories, by echoes of the past. He paused before the first door. Inside, a room covered in dust and debris revealed rows of old hospital beds. On one bed lay a patient gown, perfectly preserved as if someone had just stepped out. But what made him freeze was the faint outline of a figure standing at the foot of the bed, gray and indistinct, staring directly at him. Daniel's breath caught. He lifted the camera, his hands trembling. The figure didn't move, didn't speak. It only waited. Then, with a sound like cracking ice, it vanished. Daniel forced himself to step forward, the floorboards groaning under his weight. The faint smell of decay grew stronger, mingling with something sweeter, almost like perfume, but old, ancient, and cloying. His flashlight illuminated peeling wallpaper and dark stains on the walls, but no one else appeared, at least, not yet. He moved cautiously past the beds, each step echoing like a warning. From the far end of the corridor came a low murmur, almost melodic, like someone humming a tune he couldn't recognize. Daniel tilted his head, straining to hear. It seemed to rise and fall in rhythm with his own heartbeat. A sudden sound, a chair scraping against the floor, made him spin around. The hallway was empty. Only shadows moved, stretching unnaturally in the flashlight's beam. He whispered, "It's just the building, the wind," but even as he said it, the hair on the back of his neck stood on end. Daniel approached another door, this one marked with a small plaque that read, "Therapy Room, 1924. The door was half open, and he hesitated before pushing it further. Inside, the room was surprisingly intact, faded chairs, cracked tiles, and a chalkboard with illegible writing. The air felt thicker here, heavier, as though the room itself was holding its breath. On the chalkboard, in faint, almost imperceptible chalk, were words that made Daniel stop cold. "We see you. We follow you." The hairs on his arms prickled. His instincts screamed to turn and run, but something, curiosity, perhaps obsession, kept him rooted. He lifted his camera, snapping a photo. The shutter clicked, and for a fleeting moment, the room seemed to pulse, shadows twisting across the walls as if alive. He stepped back, nearly tripping over a chair leg. The humming grew louder, more insistent. He followed the sound down a short hallway that ended in another spiral staircase, this one leading even deeper underground. The steps were worn, slick with moisture, and Daniel gripped the railing tightly, trying not to imagine what might be waiting below. At the bottom, he found himself in a vast subterranean chamber. Rusted medical equipment littered the floor, gurneys, restraints, and shattered glass containers. The walls were lined with small, barred rooms, each darkened, their contents invisible. The humming was louder here, emanating from every corner, every shadow. And then he saw them, faint shapes moving inside the barred rooms. Figures, hunched and gray, their faces obscured, drifting slowly, endlessly, as though trapped between life and death. They didn't notice him at first, but as his flashlight swept over them, one of them turned its head. Its eyes were hollow, black voids that seemed to pierce Daniel's very soul. The humming stopped instantly. Silence fell, thick and suffocating. Daniel's stomach dropped. He felt, watched, surrounded, yet alone. A sudden crash behind him made him spin. A metal tray had fallen, rolling across the floor. The echo seemed amplified, bouncing endlessly off the chamber walls. And then the whispers began, soft at first, almost imperceptible. "Leave, leave, leave." But Daniel couldn't. Not yet. He lifted his camera again, snapping another photo. The flash illuminated the chamber, revealing more figures, more eyes, all staring, all waiting. And in that brief light, he thought he saw movement in the shadows behind them, something large, something that shouldn't exist. His breath quickened. He had come to document the asylum, to capture proof of its horrors. But now he realized he was no longer an observer. He was part of the building, part of its story, part of whatever ancient madness lingered in these walls. The humming resumed, louder now, and it was joined by laughter. High-pitched, broken, and terrible. It seemed to echo from every room, every shadow, every corner. Daniel's knees buckled. He backed away, fumbling for the stairs, but the way he had come seemed gone, replaced by endless walls stretching into darkness. Panic clawed at him. He ran, blindly, following the light of his shaking flashlight. The whispers, the hum, the laughter, they followed, closing in, consuming the silence. And then he heard it, clear as day, a voice, soft and deadly calm, whispering right into his ear. "You shouldn't be here." Daniel froze. The air grew colder, heavier. His camera dropped, clattering to the floor, lens cracking. The shadows seemed to reach for him, stretching impossibly, filling the room. His flashlight flickered once, twice, then went out. Darkness swallowed him. Daniel stumbled blindly in the pitch-black chamber, his hands brushing against cold, damp walls. Every movement was met with an eerie echo, twisting his own fear back at him. The whispers had grown into murmurs, unintelligible but relentless, surrounding him from every direction. A faint glow appeared ahead, pale and flickering, like candlelight struggling against the dark. Daniel crawled toward it, knees scraping against the wet floor. As he got closer, he realized the glow was coming from an old operating theater, long abandoned, yet somehow illuminated from within. The room was a grotesque shrine to forgotten medicine, rusted instruments laid neatly on trays, patient restraints dangling from the walls, and a cracked examination table in the center. Shadows stretched unnaturally, bending around corners, crawling along the floor like liquid. Daniel's flashlight, weak and trembling, barely pierced the gloom. A voice, clear and deliberate, broke the silence, "Daniel Mercer." He froze. The voice wasn't behind him, or in front of him, it seemed to come from everywhere at once. His instincts screamed at him to run, yet his curiosity chained him in place. Slowly, he raised the camera, snapping a photo. The flash illuminated a figure sitting in the corner of the room, a woman in a hospital gown, her face pale and gaunt, hair hanging in wet strands over hollow eyes. She stared at him, unblinking, as though she had been waiting centuries for someone to see her. Who are you?" Daniel whispered, his voice shaking. The figure didn't respond. Instead, she slowly raised a hand, pointing toward a doorway at the far end of the room. The glow pulsed, beckoning him forward. Against every instinct, Daniel stepped through the doorway. The floor beneath him felt uneven, sinking slightly as if he were walking on something living. The glow grew brighter, and the whispers turned into voices, hundreds of them, overlapping, speaking at once, chanting his name. He stumbled into a long corridor lined with mirrors. Each mirror reflected not his own image, but figures, patients, doctors, shadows, frozen in time, staring directly at him. Some moved when he blinked, others twisted into impossible shapes. Daniel tried to turn away, but the mirrors were everywhere, trapping him in a hall of endless reflections. A sudden crash echoed behind him. One of the mirrors shattered, and the sound was deafening. In the shards, he saw something he could not comprehend, hundreds of Daniel Mercers, all screaming silently, reaching out from the glass. Heart pounding, he ran down the corridor, each step feeling heavier, as if the building itself were dragging him into its depths. The whispers now became screams, overlapping and layering, filling his mind with static. Then he reached a door marked only with a single symbol, an eye carved into the wood. A cold breeze escaped from the gap beneath it, carrying the unmistakable scent of iron and decay. Daniel's hand trembled as he pushed it open. Inside was a chamber unlike anything he had seen before. The walls pulsed subtly, alive with faint movement. The air shimmered, and the floor seemed liquid, rippling with every step he took. In the center of the room floated a figure, faceless, dark, and impossibly tall. It regarded him silently, a presence more ancient than the asylum itself. A voice, deep and resonant, filled the chamber. "You are not supposed to be here, Daniel Mercer. Leave, or join us forever." Daniel swallowed hard, backing away, but the figure moved as if the space itself bent to its will. The whispers and screams crescendoed into a deafening roar, vibrating through his chest. He tripped over the pulsing floor, falling to his knees. The flashlight rolled away, casting the room in intermittent shadows. For a moment, he thought he saw the faces of all the asylum's lost souls swirling around him, their mouths opening and closing in silent cries. Then, the figure extended a hand, reaching toward him. Daniel felt a cold, impossible pressure, like ice sinking into his bones. His vision blurred, darkness creeping in from the edges, swallowing everything. And just as the figure's hand grazed his shoulder, the flashlight flickered back to life. Daniel gasped, collapsing onto the floor. The chamber was empty. No figure, no pulsing walls, no floating darkness. Only the broken flashlight illuminating the empty, decaying room. Shaking, he scrambled to his feet. The whispers had stopped, replaced by silence so profound it pressed against his ears. He realized then that something had followed him from the darkness, or perhaps, it had always been inside him. Daniel stumbled toward the exit, each step heavy with exhaustion and terror. The asylum seemed to shift around him, hallways stretching impossibly, doors appearing where none had been before. The whispers returned, faint but insistent, "Stay, stay." He reached the main entrance. The storm outside had ceased, leaving an eerie, unnatural calm. With a final push, he opened the door and stepped into the rain-soaked night. Behind him, the asylum groaned, shutters rattling, as if sighing in disappointment. He didn't look back. The hollow windows seemed to watch him, but he ran, never stopping until Blackwood Hill disappeared behind the trees. Daniel lived. But every night, when he closed his eyes, he heard the whispers, the hum, the soft, insistent voice calling his name. The asylum had let him leave, for now. And somewhere deep in the shadows of Blackwood Hill, it waited. Always waiting.